In this video, we're going to create a function with no inputs and no outputs. So I'm going to, in my notes file, I'll say what I'm doing, a function with no inputs or outputs, and I'll show you what that looks like. But we're actually going to create it in a separate file. So right now we're still saving all of our functions in their own separate M files, where the function name has to be the same as the file name. And then I will copy and paste it back in here when I'm done. So create a separate file with the following code, and I'll say, I'll probably comment it out when I paste it over here. So I'm going to create a new one, and you can do that by clicking the new or the plus sign here. And let's, as always, we start with the word function for a function file, but we want the output to be none. There is no output. So I use empty square brackets. You can put a space in there if you want. We do need the equal sign, and we do need a name for the function. So I'll call this star, and then I've got empty parentheses. So both the square brackets for the output and the round brackets for the input are blank. They're empty. There's nothing in there. And what I'm going to do is a bunch of commands that do some stuff. And then anytime somebody calls this function by using this word star, these commands will execute. There's no input, there's no output. It's just going to do these the same way every time. There's no variability here. So here's what I want to do. I want to create an array of angles, which I will call theta. And that will be, let's start at pi over 2 and go to a lot. Let's say 4.8 times pi, and then we'll do it in increments of 0.8 times pi. So you might notice I picked something a sixth of this one. So 4.8 here and 0.8 there. We'll see what happens. So I don't need to see all of those thetas in the command window every time somebody runs this program, so suppress that. And then we'll create an R vector that's just ones from 1 to 6. This is a nice way to create kind of a blank array that's the appropriate size that I can then do something with. So I just filled it in with ones, but now let's fill it in with something else. Oh no, ones is fine in this case. We don't need to fill it in with anything else. I'm going to plot a polar graph with theta and r, where the distance will just be 1, and then theta kind of jumps around like this. So that's it. Hit end. That's all this function does. Every time it gets called, it's going to do that and create a graph, because remember, this line polar will create a polar coordinates graph. Now let's save it. We have to save it with the same file name as the function name, and now I can call it. So I'll come back here and fill in the code, but let's go ahead and just call it and say star. If I run this section, I didn't suppress the R, but I get this nice picture. So that's pretty. I'm going to close that and go back and fix my R. It's even highlighting it like, hey, are you sure you don't want to suppress that output? Yeah, I do actually. So let's save that. Make sure you save it before you run it again. And you can even do something like A equals star and say, whatever the output is from star, I want to assign it to the variable called capital A. See what happens when you do that. Too many output arguments. We're getting an error because we're asking for an output, and MATLAB knows this function isn't going to give us an output. So we can't do this. We have to call it with no output being saved, just star. So now when I run the section, I get it. I don't get the R's in the command space and the command window, which is good. So that's a function with no inputs and no outputs. All right, I'll see you in the next video.